Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and Captain America Brave New World is a brave new movie, truly reconceived during the production and post-production process with reportedly extensive reshoots and even a retitle from original title New World Order to Brave New World. I went into what we think really happened with this process in another video, and now after seeing the film, I can honestly say I am impressed with how seamless the final product looks. And that's part of why I think, despite critics and movie commentators who are too plugged into the movie production news being harsh on this film, audiences going in who are less aware of the process are giving it a way higher audience score. And I think that's a good thing. Yet, I think even for the average moviegoer, there were several moments in this film and shots repeatedly shown in trailers and in promos as recently as the days before the film came out of full scenes and sequences that were not in the final cut of this movie, and other evidence that things were reworked. So after going back through all of the trailer footage and watching this movie a couple more times and applying my own experience with production and editing and screenwriting, I think I figured out what was removed and why. So I present to you, viewer, the original version of Captain America 4. What was the New World Order cut of this movie? Before I begin, you can now join New Rockstars as a channel member by hitting that join button down by subscribe. Supporting us as a member gives you access to custom emotes and early access to ad-free versions of our special rewatch breakdowns like our current Daredevil rewatch series. Okay, there was the major reshot sequences that have already been reported out there. Back in May 2023, there were some scenes shot with WWE star Seth Rollins as Sidewinder and Rosa Salazar as Diamondback from the Serpent Society, the sequence at the beginning of the movie, that in May 2024 were completely reshot with Giancarlo Esposito as Sidewinder. The creative team behind the film maintains that the total reshoots for this film amounted to no more than 22 days. But what they don't say is that 22 days is 3 weeks and 1 day. And the average shoot time of a major film like this is something like 8 weeks. So if you do the math there, that's like at least a third of the movie that could have been reworked here. And that's a lot of a movie. But there were reports of the reshoots for this movie being less expensive as the reshoots were for other movies. So I think that tells us that the reshot sequences of this film were not big VFX sequences, but rather interior scenes with just actors on a specific soundstage. And now what I'm curious about after seeing the movie are the various shots from trailers that were shot for the movie that were included in trailers and other marketing starting in July 2024 after the reshoots were completed through the end of summer 2024, through fall 2024, and through the first 6 weeks of 2025. And shots from what seems like pretty huge scenes for this movie that were not in the version that we just saw in theaters. Reworking that was happening even after the reshoots happened. These scenes include a funeral scene that was set in that same cemetery where, in the theatrical cut of the film, President Ross lays flowers on the grave of his late wife, Karen Lee Ross. The Karen grave moment was also included separately in trailers and promos, but there was an additional scene with a much bigger group of attendees, including Sam Wilson. There was a gun salute, and according to early pre-reshoot set photos, Liv Tyler was on set for this shoot. Looking back on the movie, we think this is probably going to be President Ross's funeral, and he was going to die in this movie. But since that was clearly reworked during post-production, the fact that they still put this funeral in multiple trailers and in promos for the film deep into the marketing cycle is very weird. Also, there's a shot of who we assumed was Samuel Stearns, the leader, with his green hand visible as he wore a hoodie, taking a photo of Sam, Joaquin, and Isaiah as they arrived outside the White House. This shot was in the very first teaser for the film and in a few other trailers for the film, but not in a theatrical cut. The theatrical cut of the film showed the three of them posing for photos, but we never cut to Stearns' perspective across the street. The final version of the movie implies that he was still at Camp Echo 1 during that time. There was another shot from the trailers of Samuel Stearns from outside Walter Reed Hospital, where in the movie Joaquin Torres recovers after his injury. Stearns wears an Uncle Sam hat and pushes through the crowd toward where the microphones are. This shot was not in the July teaser or in the November trailer, but in December 2024's special look, they added this shot. So this tells us that they were still reworking the leader scenes as late as December, just 2 months before the movie came out. Instead, the movie showed us Samuel Stearns turning himself in the Walter Reed courtyard, but the two men were alone. No other extras were in the background of the scene until the FBI arrives to arrest Samuel Stearns. And many have observed that the scene looks quite a bit like it might have been shot on a green screen slate, and it was followed by an awkward insert of the press in the White House Rose Garden suddenly getting this news alert of his arrest. This is not a hot take, but my favorite part of going out to eat is the food. I've never cleared time out of my calendar just to go to a restaurant and soak up the ambiance. What I really want is a fresh, high-quality meal made by someone who knows more about food than I ever will. And if I can get that at home, even better. I've saved money, saved time, and still got a great meal. That's why I use Cook Unity. Cook Unity delivers restaurant-quality meals from award-winning chefs right to your door, saving you the hassle of shopping, cooking, and planning. Their menu is huge, so you get to enjoy a wide variety of global gourmet flavors to suit your palate. And if you've just made a New Year's resolution to go vegan, keto, high protein, low sodium, or any of 1,000 1,000 other dietary choices, Cook Unity has you covered. Personally, I'm trying to be better about not eating so many ultra-processed foods, and Cook Unity is making that easy and delicious to do. We tried California-style chicken enchiladas from Chef Kevin Meehan, and it was so good. We've also loved the French beef ragu and the Mediterranean chicken shawarma bowl. Cook Unity is offering our viewers 50% off their first week. Just click the link in the description below and use code NRockstars50 to try it out. Once again, that's 50% off your first week of Cook Unity if you click the link in the description and use code NRockstars50. Thanks to Cook Unity for sponsoring this video. Also in trailers were several scenes with Shira Haas as Ruth Bat-Seraph. In the July teaser, there was a shot of her seated looking up at a hulking, trembling figure, suggesting that she knew that President Ross had this Red Hulk condition. Also, there were several shots of Ruth during the Celestial Island aerial battle with Secret Service agent Taylor, one of them on the deck of an aircraft carrier that's on fire, and then two of them with their guns out together head down a quarter of a Navy vessel. Interesting to note, though, that the ship that they were on in the movie was the USS Milius, a destroyer, part of the carrier Group 5 of this movie, but in these trailer shots, they're on the deck of an aircraft carrier, which would be a completely different ship than the destroyer President Ross was on. Also, we should note that when Ruth shows up with Sam and Joaquin on the USS Milius in the movie, you'll notice she's wearing some kind of blue armor under her coat that she doesn't wear at any other part of the movie, and she's very much put into the background of most of these Celestial Island battle scenes, so that really her character ends up having no narrative reason to accompany them on this mission and the way it plays out in the theatrical cut. And there's also this shot in trailers of Sam and Joaquin from a February 3rd promo where the two of them are in some outdoor market in a location completely unfamiliar to the rest of the film. Looks like another country outside of the United States, but in the movie, the only places they go to are in Mexico, and then in Baltimore, in the DC area, in the Indian Ocean, and back to DC. And at no point do they ever go out to a market anywhere. So I'm just kind of scratching my head where in the movie this would have come up. On top of this, when you watch the film, you could just tell some scenes were just shot and edited in a way that looks a bit out of place with the rest of the movie. There was the scene with the leader and Sam in the Walter Reed Hospital courtyard that I mentioned. There was also Sam's final speech to Red Hulk in the Cherry Blossom Street. Joaquin Torres' line about Ruth Bat-Seraph being born in Israel happens when he's off screen, and it sounds like the line was recorded with ADR. This movie's original screenwriter Malcolm Spellman also said in an interview that there was an early draft of the film that would have included Elijah Eli Bradley, Isaiah's grandson, played by Elijah Richardson in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, somewhere in this movie, but that his role was cut. And I just came across this back in October. There was an anonymous post on Reddit, a reported leak sourced from scooper Charles Murphy, from someone claiming to have seen a late test screening of the film that ended up describing the plot with near perfect accuracy to what this movie ended up being. But one major exception: this plot description includes Sam and Joaquin going to Stark Technologies, meeting with Amadeus Cho, and it seems like it was Amadeus who was going to investigate the heart pills that had been given to President Ross to determine that these pills were poisoned with gamma radiation. This description also says that it was going to be mentioned in the post-credit scene that the leader gave Amadeus Cho Hulk serum before he gets to the doomsday hints that we saw. Amadeus Cho did not come up in the final cut of this movie, but there was Commander Dunphy's unseen contact who called him to tell him that the pills had gamma radiation, and we just never saw who that guy was. I should say that it's also possible that this plot leak might have been distributed with one piece of knowingly incorrect information as a test by Marvel Studios or by Disney to determine the source of a leak. I really hope actually that's the case. Now, this leak, which I'm only even mentioning now after the movie has come out, also describes the version of the leader in this movie as Tim Blake Nelson looking like he's wearing a rubber brain cap. So this rumored October screening, if it even happened, would have been a version of this movie after the leader was redesigned, if he was. When you look at how this movie evolved over production, there were just some big changes that they clearly needed to restructure the movie around. One was the death of William Hurt in spring 2022, which meant that this movie lost its President Ross. But when Harrison Ford approached Marvel Studios expressing interest in working with them, Kevin Feige pitched Ford on President Ross, aka Red Hulk, and this production now had a new A-lister that they really had to reconceive the movie around. I think Red Hulk was always the plan, but I think the original idea was to have the William Hurt version of the character turn into Red Hulk as a secret third act twist that they would not have shown in the trailers. But now, with Harrison Ford, there was just more pressure for the studio to lead with this movie being equally a Red Hulk movie along with a fourth Captain America movie. There's also the Ruth Bat-Seraph Sabra of it all. Again, I go more into the timeline of that decision as well as the timeline to retitle this movie from New World Order, which was the title of the first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but later criticized for the term being associated with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, to its current title of Brave New World, a nod to the Aldous Huxley novel. And in our spoiler review over on the break room, I go into a theory that I have that might have actually been the thing that led to executive producer Nate Moore's departure from the studio, to insert an Israeli mutant character in this movie without really thinking how the world would process that. The truth is, there is not one original version of this movie, but probably somewhere between 4 and 6 major stages of this movie as it was in development and in production and in post-production. But here is a breakdown of removed details that were a part of this movie at some point, but were removed. 1. Ruth Bat-Seraph was going to be a bigger part of this movie. Probably not a Black Widow, but a more comic accurate Israeli mutant superhero. Her mutant status, I think, was the reason Marvel Studios was eager to put her in the movie, and that's why adamantium was introduced in this movie. But to downplay Ruth's connections to Mossad and just briefly gloss over her Israeli background and to give her a new identity as a former Black Widow also probably meant erasing her status as a mutant. Next, Red Hulk was originally, I think, going to be a third act twist, and President Ross was going to die at the end of this movie. The reason why Sam looks green screened in during that speech to talk Red Hulk down, and what some people might have seen as just a forced in extra scene, calling back this very much injected cherry blossom memory after what was previously a pretty vicious battle that was pretty well choreographed with an explosive climactic ending. The original idea was for Ross to not survive that blast, but maybe they got some feedback at a test screening that people just didn't want to end the movie with Captain America killing the President of the United States. Even if that wasn't the intention based off of Ross's past health issues, that still just might have been how it came across. I believe that among the reshoots was to remove the President Ross funeral scene that Liv Tyler shot and to shoot this new interior scene on the raft with Liv Tyler and Harrison Ford and Anthony Mackie. I believe that they moved the establishing exterior shot of the raft that we saw in trailers, which was originally how we were going to be led into the post-credit scene with Stearns on the raft, and then they moved that exterior shot to earlier in the movie to this new scene with Ross in his cell. Also, Samuel Stearns. Based on the trailer shots of Stearns as a photographer at the White House, he must have been, in a previous version of this movie, able to leave Camp Echo 1 earlier without needing Sam and Joaquin to break into the base. He was a more free-roaming character in the earlier acts of the film. Also, an earlier version of this movie must have had Stearns revealing himself in a more theatrical stunt before the press outside Walter Reed, dressed as Uncle Sam. But maybe there was just something off about the scene that required them to reshoot it with Stearns and Sam alone in the courtyard later, followed by the press in the Rose Garden getting that same awkward news alert on all their phones, which then led to the pretty rushed transition of Ross transforming into Red Hulk. In general, I just think there were some earlier cuts of this film in which Tim Blake Nelson played the character with a different energy, maybe as more of a performer, and that would have boiled over outside of Walter Reed. Also, I think there might have been some earlier versions of this movie that might have had Samuel Stearns' head looking different, because Marvel did release official character designs on posters and 2 Funko figurines that did not include the lumpy brain texture, which tells us that at some point his head looked different. Finally, there were the old elements that we know about, a version of the Serpent Society where Seth Rollins played Seth Volker Sidewinder, which might have been changed just for like tonal issues with Rollins being a lesser experienced actor, something that he has gone into in interviews. Now, Vulture also posted a report in which a VFX artist claimed that they did VFX work for entire sequences on this movie that got cut using some colorful language to describe his working relationship with Marvel. Now, that same Vulture writer was also the writer who wrote the hit piece on Marvel's VFX after Quantumania, and I feel like he might have a bit of an axe to grind, and he might just know the same anonymous source who just loves shitting on Marvel to his buddy at Vulture. But we do know from just watching trailer footage alone that a lot was removed from this movie. Still, the fact that the version of this movie that we saw was as seamless as it was is just a testament to Julius Ona and editors Matthew Schmidt and Madeline Gavin for what I've always said is the most important stage in which a movie is truly rewritten for the final time, in the edit room. It's messy, but it's how movies get made. Comment down below with your thoughts on all this, and please support us by joining the channel as a member for ad-free versions of select videos. You can grab a great nerdy gift option from our merch store, nerdriot.shop. Follow me at EA Voss, and subscribe to all the channels in the new Rockstars network for in-depth coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.